Hey guys, it's M4J here and welcome back to the M4J network here on OpenTTD. This is a time-lapse of the stream that took place last Thursday, so if you're not interested in time-lapses, that's absolutely fine. That's the reason why this is a 0.5 episode rather than a main episode. Likewise, if you're not a fan of the streams, if you prefer to see things a little bit faster, this is the perfect video for you. Now, this video was meant to not have the logo, the music overlay, and the chat in the top corner. I botched the recording settings though, so I apologise for that. We are going to have those here this week, but hopefully next week they won't be here at all. I think I've managed to find a way to make it work. It's really weird the way OBS works. Apparently if you put it in studio mode, it doesn't do selective recording, which I would have thought that's what selective recording was made for, but apparently not. So lesson learned. Apologies for that. Especially because in the stream I talked a great deal about how I set it up this certain way and how pleased I was with that and blah 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 blah, and it turned out absolute cobblers. Anyway, today's episode is the time-lapse of the construction of the Munfingford to what is now known as Queen City Junction line. That's probably not going to be the name of the line as a whole, it's probably going to have a different name to that. But I was actually surprised with how well this route turned out. I'd been putting it off for a while because I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do with it, and it was actually a perfect candidate to bring back streaming for, because having the input of the guys in the chat, which you will be able to see throughout this video, was actually very, very useful. So I miss streaming. I do miss streaming, but technical limitations have kind of stopped me from doing it before now. But it looks like I've managed to find a way to make it work, so I'm quite pleased with that. And it looks like that then means streaming might be making a triumphant return. We shall see. So in this episode today, I was hoping to go over rail news, because I was hoping my magazine would have arrived, but it hasn't. So I'm going to kind of pull some things out of thin air and see if I can create some conversation about it. The first thing I want to talk about is HighSpeed 2, because this is a debate myself and George have been having on Discord, where one of us thinks one thing and one of us thinks the other. So in my opinion, the new plans for HighSpeed 2 are completely pointless. Completely pointless. So, if I refer back to Discord, and particularly the bits that are irking me. So, it's to do with the eastern leg. So that's between Birmingham and, let's say, the northeast of England. So Newcastle, Sheffield, Leeds, places like that. I think it also goes through the East Midlands. So, you know, Nottingham, Derbyshire, Leicestershire, that kind of area. So the plans in particular that annoy me are changing the Sheffield loop and shortening it to run on the line between Sheffield and Lincoln and enter Sheffield from the north and shuttle out to Leeds, rather than the current plan to run from Claycross near Chesterfield and run to Sheffield from the south and continue north to Leeds. If you can get your head around that, you're one step ahead of me, because it took me a while to kind of interpret what that means. To me, it comes across as they're putting more and more of HighSpeed 2 now onto the main rail network, which completely defeats the point, in my opinion anyway, of having a designated high-speed line. So I look at countries like France and Germany, where particularly in Germany, there's areas where they've had an existing main line and they've built a new intercity express line directly next to it, and that is the high-speed section, and that's the section that the ICE trains run on. That's what HighSpeed 2 should be, in my opinion. HighSpeed 2 was originally designed to be a 250 mph railway. They've since refined that down, or not even refined, they've since changed it to 225. But it's going to be at least 200 miles an hour. That's the key thing. That is the fastest rail network, rail line in the UK. There is no faster one. The second fastest is HighSpeed 1, which is the analogy I used on Discord to kind of compare what I was thinking. And I'm going to say a lot of things here that I've already said on Discord, but it's a lot easier for me to say it here than it is to type, because I can get my point across a lot easier, and I'm too lazy to type it all out. So, HighSpeed 1 is limited. The Javelins have a top speed of 140 miles an hour. That's a operating speed. The Eurostars have an operating speed of 186 to 199 miles per hour. In the UK, it's mostly limited to 186. In mainland Europe, it can go up to as high as 199. Now, in France, the TGVs run faster than the Eurostars. So actually the Eurostars hold up the TGVs slightly. Over here it's the other way around. The Eurostars are the fastest trains operating in the UK right now. And the Javelins are 46 miles per hour slower. So that means if a Javelin leaves St Pancras heading towards Ashford, a Eurostar has to wait a certain amount of time before it can follow it so that it doesn't catch it. And that causes issues when it comes to pathing. Now, if it was the other way around and a Javelin was to follow a Eurostar, that, there's no issue there. But when a faster train is following a slower train, there has to be kind of a buffer. And this is further amplified when you think that a Javelin stops at Stratford International and Ebbsfleet International along the way. Now those stations have been carefully designed so that the Javelin can get off the main running line as quickly as possible. And every single time I've gone on the Javelins between London and I used to go to Canterbury to visit my brother, but these days I go to Stratford a lot of the time. Literally as soon as the train turns off the line into the Stratford International, and Eurostar will come bombing through. So they've deliberately made it so that the Eurostar is following as close behind the Javelin as possible, so that as soon as it turns off the main running line, the Eurostar can get past. And that's smart, that's how it works. Now the issue I have here is to do with speed. So a Javelin starts slowing down for Stratford in the main running tunnels, which means that the Eurostar behind it could eventually get held up. And that's the last thing you want when you're running a high-speed, efficient railway, is to have slower trains holding everything up. And that's what I think HighSpeed 2 is starting to become now. So you have this plan around Sheffield and Lincoln. There's talk about having the cross-country network join HighSpeed 2. And I'm not assuming that they're going to be running Voyagers on HighSpeed 2 or anything like that. I know there'll be custom-built trains. My issue is this. If you've got a main running line of 225 miles per hour, but there's a junction every 20 miles, say that junction is built to 150 miles per hour. I don't think the classic compatible trains will have the same top speed as the designated high-speed trains. I reckon already there will be a difference. Maybe the classic compatible would have a high speed of 186, same as the Eurostars. So already you've got, a 40 mile per hour loss there. So that doesn't sound like much, but when you think how small the UK is, it's only sort of 400 miles between London and Edinburgh. How many miles does it have to be before that gap becomes obvious? I reckon 100 miles. And if you're adding extra junctions in every 50 to 70 miles, that's almost half of your network that could potentially be a train accelerating, having joined the main line, or decelerating in order to take a junction off the main line. And half of your route suddenly becomes a train running at half speed so that it can diverge or converge. And that's my issue, is the original plan for HighSpeed 2 had two junctions. One at Birmingham, the triangular junction, so that trains could run into Birmingham and then reverse again. And the second one was just north of Birmingham, where the Y junction was. So you could go northwest towards Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, or you could go northeast towards Sheffield, Leeds, Newcastle, Edinburgh. And the northeast section, even though Manchester and Liverpool are arguably bigger than, say, Leeds, Sheffield, Newcastle, the northeast leg, for me at least, was kind of the crucial bit of the whole project, because connecting London and Edinburgh through high-speed rail, that's the two capitals of England and Scotland. That to me is major. Even though Glasgow is a bigger city, has more people living there, connecting those two capital cities, I think, was the whole point of HighSpeed 2. Having Glasgow connected to it as well was also good. But, some of these other places, say it ran through Sheffield, York, and then up to Newcastle, a lot of people will then be saying, well, what about Leeds? And that's where the Northern Powerhouse came in. HighSpeed 3, in other words. That's what that was supposed to be. It was supposed to link East Coast to West Coast through a new high-speed line of its own. And the problem I have now is a lot of people are trying to sort of combine all these projects together, and by doing that you kind of lose the core essence of what each project was supposed to be. So HighSpeed 1 was connecting London to the Channel Tunnel, And it took a long time to do, but it has now been done. And you can see already the difference it makes in that you don't have Eurostars running on the third rail system out of Waterloo at a maximum speed of 75 miles per hour, being held up by the delayed train to Staines and Windsor or whatever. That's worked really well. You can now get from London to Paris in 2 hours on train. And that's the whole point of HighSpeed 1. HighSpeed 2 was supposed to be connecting London and the north of England through the same means, without having other slower services slowing it down. And that's where I think the point has been lost, is it was never about connecting Leeds to Manchester. It was never about connecting Hull to Liverpool. It was never about connecting Lincoln to Chester. It was always about connecting London, and originally also France, Brussels, Lille, Amsterdam, you name it, because HighSpeed 1 was originally meant to connect to HighSpeed 2. But it's about connecting London to the north of England. And by doing that, you then free up paths on routes like the West Coast Main Line and the East Coast Main Line that can then be used for more local services. And it's just, as I said, it's been forgotten, really, that was the point. And now you've got these plans to integrate cross-country into HighSpeed 2, which sounds great on paper, but that's really, for me, a HighSpeed 3 type project. Maybe add an extra junction to each of the northern legs, one that goes, say, to Liverpool, North Wales, one that goes to Leeds, maybe Doncaster at a push, although Doncaster is the East Coast Main Line anyway, so that's kind of covered. And then in the south, maybe from Birmingham, have another one that branches off down towards the West Country. But if you're constantly adding extra junctions, even if all the lines converge and then a single junction joins HighSpeed 2, you've then got this sort of conundrum of, do you make it a triangular junction, in which case you are adding 2 junctions, not just one? How big does it have to be? If you're having trains running at 120 miles an hour around a junction, you can't just have a really tight triangular junction like they have at Stratford. You've got to have something that's 30 miles long. Which, do we have the space for that? Do we have the budget for that? How much more damage is that going to cause to the environment? It seems to me like a good idea on paper, but not really thought through. And by doing that, you really lose the point of what high-speed rail is supposed to be, which is fully segregated. We've already made the compromise of having HighSpeed 2 join the main line north of Birmingham, both east and west. And I really feel like we're now starting to water it down even more. And it gets to the point where if you're spending £300 billion, let's say, because that's probably how much it's going to cost by the end of all this, if you're spending £300 billion on something where the average speed is only slightly faster than the speed across the rest of the network, then it's really not worth doing, in my opinion. As much as I want to see it happen, it really isn't worth doing. And that's the core question, is, are we now at a point where too many people are interfering and it's becoming unfeasible? And personally, I think it is. I think it's getting to a point where people are either trying to sabotage it so it just gets cancelled, or people are trying to put, too many cooks spoil the broth kind of thing, and it'll end up being cancelled because of that. I don't necessarily think people are trying to sabotage the project, but I think there are too many people getting involved, and you've got this kind of what about us culture that's going on now. So if you had London, Birmingham, Manchester as the western route, and then continues up the West Coast Main Line to Glasgow, and then on the eastern side, if you had London, Birmingham, Totton, Newcastle, Edinburgh, that would be the eastern side. And then all the other connections to places like Sheffield, Doncaster, Leeds, Lincoln, they could all be made using the paths that have now been saved. I think my Google's about to respond. Google, stop. There we go. I don't know why it reacts to me. I don't use the keyword, so I don't know why it reacts. Anyway, yeah, all the other paths that are then freed up from taking the non-stop expresses off of the east and west coast main lines can then be used for more local services and semi-fast services. But if you're constantly adding more services to HighSpeed 2, and if you're trying to use justification like it can handle 18 trains per hour, so surely it can handle 6 of those to Sheffield, the answer is no, because the pathing system is not the same if you're adding more cases where trains are either decelerating or accelerating. You're probably reducing it by about a third. So it goes from 18 down to 12. And at that point, you know, that's 1 every 5 minutes. That's quite a long time between trains, especially on a high-speed route. It's unfeasible is the word. It is unfeasible. And all you're doing with then is playing into the hands of those who want it to fail. And, you know, we don't want it to fail. We want it to succeed. But that's not how you do it. In my opinion, at least, that's not how you do it. And again, you know, I'm just a guy on YouTube. I'm not qualified in this area necessarily. I kind of read between the lines a little bit of some of these plans, and there's a lot of them where I just dismiss them immediately, because especially when you're saying things like, let's make it go via XYZ, who stands to gain from that? Because your journey time could actually be longer if it serves more stations. Again, that's not how you do high-speed rail. You know, it'd be like getting on a Eurostar at St Pancras, and then stopping at Stratford, and then stopping at Ebbsfleet, and then stopping at Ashford, and then stopping at Folkestone, and then stopping at Calais, and then stopping at Lille, and then stopping at all the other sort of major stations along the route between Calais and Paris. That's then not a fast service. It could take, say, 4 hours to get to Paris, which is double the time that it currently does. And there will be people saying, but now you're serving all these extra communities. But I would argue that's what the TGVs are for. You know, they're designed to run at a fast enough speed that they can stop at intermediate stations without necessarily getting in the way of the faster trains, because they are the faster trains. And it's all to do with acceleration, it's to do with deceleration, it's to do with how quickly they can join and leave the main line. And actually China do this really well with their high-speed network. All of their stations have a pair of running lines through the middle and then 2 platforms either side. So there's normally sort of 4 to 6 platforms in total. And they have junctions where the train can leave the main line at 160 miles per hour, say, and enter the station. And that means that you're running at maximum speed for as long as possible, and you're not holding up trains behind. China also have the advantage of being absolutely massive in terms of landmass, so they can have these huge, like 100-mile gaps between stations. Same with France, same with Germany. You can have sort of 50 to 100 miles between stations, whereas in the UK we don't have that luxury. So again, it's about the 3 key locations for me: London, Birmingham, which is the UK's second city, for those of you that don't know. If anything happened to London, Birmingham would become the capital of the UK. That's why Birmingham is always treated with importance when it comes to these transport links. So yeah, you've got London, Birmingham, Manchester, which arguably is the beating heart of the Northwest, Newcastle, which is the beating heart of the Northeast, Edinburgh, Glasgow. They're kind of the 6 key, I don't know why I said 5. They're the kind of 6 key areas of the UK that I think HighSpeed 2 should serve. Everywhere else within the UK can be covered by existing infrastructure, and will be covered by existing infrastructure. And again, that's the whole point of it. It's to... HighSpeed 2 isn't there to sort of fill in the gaps, as it were. It's there to ease congestion on the faster routes around the UK and allow those routes to then be used for either more freight paths or more sort of commuter paths. And we're really losing that essence every time we say let's make it run to Lincoln or let's add cross country to it, because you end up just watering it down to the point where it's just a West Coast mainline Mark II, and it'll end up being just as congested. People will complain, and then you then spend another 15 to 20 years fixing the mistake that you made. I don't think it will work. And I'm actually getting to the point now where if that's what HighSpeed 2 is going to be, then it's no longer HighSpeed 2 in my opinion. It's just West Coast Mark II. Anyway, I think I've talked about that for quite a long time. There is another piece of news that I wanted to talk about, and it's to do with HighSpeed 1, in fact. So HighSpeed 1 runs to Ebbsfleet International, and there were talks to extend Crossrail down to Ebbsfleet International. And I don't think the plans ever really had that much traction until now, because This is a theme park bit of news, by the way, so if you're not interested in theme parks, you might have to switch off for a minute. But there is something called the London Resort that's been proposed quite a few times now. And previously it's had lack of funding, lack of interest, lack of planning permission. But now that it seems to have gained some traction. And the plan is to build 2 theme parks, or 2 gates, as it were, right next to each other. The first one is due to open in 2024, and the second one is due to open in 2029. I reckon there's going to be like a 2-year delay on that, so I reckon 2026 and 2031 is more likely. The reason this ties into HighSpeed 1 is because the site of the London Resort is just north of Ebbsfleet International Station. Literally the massive car park outside Ebbsfleet International that no one uses is going to be incorporated into the resort. There's also going to be a ferry service that runs from the city centre of London, and there's also going to be a ferry service that runs from Tilbury across the river to the new site. I think, from looking at the plans, I think it's awesome. The fact they've put so much thought into the transport links as well, it kind of reminds me of when Disneyland Paris was built and it has its own TGV station and RER station underneath the Disney Village. I believe it is the only theme park in the world that has its own high-speed station. I believe that's still the case. I'm trying to think. Germany might have. You'll probably find somewhere in Asia there will be a place in the not too distant future that will also be able to boast that. But right now I believe Disneyland Paris is the only one. Until the London Resort opens, of course, and then that will also be served by one of Europe's major high-speed rail links. Plus, Eurostars can then bring people in from mainland Europe as well. And that, to me, is how you do a high-speed route properly. So Ebbsfleet International is built in the middle of nowhere, for those of you that don't know. Literally the middle of nowhere. You turn off the A2, you sort of drive for 10 minutes through the countryside, and then bang, massive station. Or at least it was when I went there. It's probably been a bit more built up now. But I really want this project to go ahead. I love theme parks, as you know, and to have one of the world's largest theme parks in the UK. It will be the largest in the UK, and it will be one of the biggest in Europe as well. It'll be awesome. Some of the zones that I've seen, the themed lands, look really, really cool as well. I'll probably talk about this a bit more in my next Global Ventures video, whenever that might be, because I'm struggling with inspiration for that right now. So, kind of taking a bit of a hiatus on that one. But, it's not going anywhere. It will be back. But yeah, the whole thing of incorporating a high-speed rail link into these areas, that's what it's meant to be for me. And again, going back to HighSpeed 2, I just don't see... It's lost its identity. It just doesn't feel like a high-speed railway anymore. It just feels like an extension as to what we've already got. And that, for me, there's no point. There is no point in doing that, because it won't work. It'll be heavily congested, the trains will never reach their maximum speed, and you're just fueling the argument of it's a white elephant and it should never have been built in the first place. And I don't want that, because, then the people who hate railways, or the people who look down on us as rail enthusiasts, they essentially win at that stage. And that's not right, in my opinion. So let's agree to disagree on it, because I don't think I'll ever agree with it, all of you guys, about it. Personally, I have my own thoughts and feelings about it, and I think they're perfectly justified, and I think you have your own thoughts and feelings about it, and they're also perfectly justified. No one's right, no one's wrong. That's the good thing about having an opinion, is it's yours. Hold on to it tight. But at the same time, don't just read an article about it and assume that that's right, because when you get to uni and you start looking at sources, you'll quite quickly see that there's always something that someone is gaining from writing what they write, and it's never the reader who is top of the priorities. It is always someone else's personal gain. And if you take what you read as gospel each time, and you just assume that that's true because it's written down, then you are kind of setting yourself up quite a bit. So all these proposals, all these articles, all these things like that, I kind of just take them with a pinch of salt these days. I don't really put too much belief into them. And I count the London Resort in that as well. Ultimately, it looks exciting, but I'll believe it when I see it, because this is the 5th time now that I've read an article about it existing and what it's going to look like, and it's completely different now to what it was sort of 10 years ago when it first was mooted around. You know, they were talking about things like Doctor Who Land and stuff like that, and that seems to have disappeared completely unless it's hidden away somewhere else. So yeah, I'll truly believe it when I see it, and it's the same with HighSpeed too. I'll believe it when I see it, but right now I don't see it happening anymore. I think we're getting to a stage now where, you know, we might build a new London to Birmingham link, because Euston is under construction and so is Birmingham, but I think the rest of it will all just fall apart and it will never get finished. And I truly believe that's where we're at now, because we're just faffing around for so long. This thing was supposed to have been opened 4 years from now, and at this rate it's going to be another 20 years before construction even starts, because too many people are getting involved and messing around. We've had changes of government as well, which doesn't help, because the new transport minister comes in and they have their own thoughts and feelings about how it should be done. And again, I'm not getting political, that's just a fact. It's too many people. That's the thing, it's too many people. And I don't want to support nationalisation, because I'm firmly against it, as you all know. But one thing that the French and the Germans do very, very well is control their railways. Because as soon as they want to build a new project, it goes to a planning committee, they say yes or no, and then construction starts. There's none of this inquiry, there's none of this, judicial panel that has to be involved or anything like that. And that, to me, that's so backwards, because they're the government-owned railways, and that's what you would expect from a government-owned railway, because it's taxpayers' money and things like that. Over here, yes, Network Rail is government. Is a government department and it's taxpayers' money. But if you build it privately, HighSpeed 2, and get some investors involved, a bit like HighSpeed 1 was, then it doesn't matter what the panels think, and it doesn't matter what the taxpayers think, because it's not their money being spent. And I think that's what needs to happen now. If it's going to happen, we need to stop all these processes and panels and planning committees and, you know, spending 6 months to a year deciding how big the junction at milepost 295 is going to be, and just get on with the damn thing. Otherwise it will never get built, and it will just get more and more expensive as it goes to more and more panels, because we're spending money on it right now. We are spending money on it just planning the damn thing, and it's just a waste. It is a massive, massive waste. Right. It's not really a ranty episode, it's more of a in my opinion type episode. And I like the opportunity to do these because it's easier than having to type it on Discord. Because on Discord things get heated very, very quickly, because it's very easy to misinterpret what someone's actually saying through text. Whereas when you say it out loud, you can hear my voice, you can hear my emotions, you can hear my thought process, and it kind of makes a bit more sense. But I'm not a fan of, tit for tat on Discord, and I'm not a fan of tit for tat in general. You know, if you have an opinion that's different to mine, that's perfectly fine, you're entitled to it. Never reply to someone's message saying no, you're wrong, because they're not. You're wrong for thinking that, in all honesty. They're not wrong. But yeah, hopefully those who do disagree kind of understand my thought process a little bit more. And if you're wanting to reply to this, you're more than welcome to do so. I want to understand your thought process a little bit more. Because there are people who just read these reviews and take it as literal, and I want to understand a bit more about why that is. Why you might read an idea that someone's had and just gone, right, that's what we're doing, and there's no kind of in between. There's no bit where you kind of think, okay, why are they saying that, and what do they stand to gain from saying that? But it's not a conspiracy. I don't believe that in the slightest. I think that there are genuine people out there who just want what's best but don't necessarily know how to get there. I think that's what the issue is right now. And then there are also people that want to get in the way and stop it from happening, of course, but that's by the by. Anyway, thank you very much everybody for watching. I really do appreciate you watching these videos, and I appreciate everyone who turned out to the stream as well, because it was, I came off the back of that stream on quite a high. I went into it really dreading it, because I didn't think it was going to work, and I didn't think people were going to watch it. So we had quite a few people, you might have seen throughout the chat. It was a really fun stream, really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to this week's one, because we're going to be continuing this project, as well as adding a couple of other main lines throughout the network. And hopefully you guys will be along for the ride there too. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you're enjoying the series, drop some comments down below with ideas for future episodes, and also let me know what your thoughts are on HighSpeed 2 and all these review processes, and the London resort as well if you'd like to get involved with that. And besides all that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support, and until next time, I will see you soon.